Hi, this is Sam, your music teacher from Star Music Academy. Today we are going to talk about everything strings. I'm going to divide this video into two parts. The first part we are going to talk about their differences, like the different types of strings, the different strings thickness, which one to get, and the different brands that you could get out there. The second part we are going to get practical and I'll show you how to properly change your strings to get the best outcome from your guitars. Now, this video is not sponsored by anyone and all the opinions are of my own. If you're new to this channel and haven't subscribed yet, please hit the subscribe button and also the notification bell so that you'll be notified for future videos where we talk about interesting topics in music. So if you're keen to learn about strings, please stay tuned. So the most commonly asked question that I've received is, how often do I need to change my strings? The answer is, when your string sounds dead. It just sounds dull, they don't ring as much, no brightness or sparkle left even in the high strings. Now what causes strings to go dead? Strings go dead for two reasons. First is the corrosion from our sweaty fingers. So basically it attacks the metal surface on your strings. Secondly, the gunk on your fingers clog the space between the string windings. They all have common looks when they're dead. They're all black and rusty. And when you play them, they sound like dead rubber. I mean it. On your left hand fingers, they feel tough and hard to press. So if that happens to your guitar right now, it's a sign to change your strings. Okay, the first one I'm going to talk about is acoustic strings. There are two common types of acoustic strings that people use at the moment. First is phosphor bronze and second is 80-20 bronze. Now what is the difference between them, you ask? The 80-20 bronze acoustic guitar strings offer a bright bell-like tone, and the 80-20 bronze name refers to the metal wrapped wire composition that is made of 80% copper and 20% zinc, which is brass. Whereas the phosphor bronze strings offer a tone with both warmth and sparkle. So if you know that you have a dark sounding guitar, then you might want to try a set of 80-20 bronze strings. It might liven up your guitar sound. You know, guitars like Martins or any guitars with Indian rosewood back and sides usually has a deeper and darker kind of sound. On the other hand, if you have a brighter sounding guitar, then you might benefit from a pure phosphor bronze strings, as it would add some warmth to your overall sound without sacrificing the sparkle on top. You know, guitars like Matons or Taylors or anything with mahogany back and sides tends to have a mid-range focused sound, which a lot of people perceived as a brighter sound. Now, what is string gauge? String gauge is the thickness or diameter of a guitar string. It is measured in 1/1000th of an inch. So for example, a 10 gauge string is 0.0010 inches. Guitar string packs are usually referred by their thinnest string. For example, 10s means 10 to 50s, or 11s would mean 11 to 52, and so on. In this case, thicker strings provide more bass and thinner strings produce more treble. Now you may ask, what are the most common string gauges for acoustic? We have commonly three gauges. First is 11 to 52s, and then there's 12 to 53, and lastly we have 13 to 56. Now, if you're a beginner acoustic player, it might be a good idea to start off with 11 to 52 gauge, which is slightly lighter and easier to press down on your left hand fingers. Then you could gradually going up in the gauges as you build your strength. Because remember, the thicker the strings are, the better the tone you're going to get. But it is harder to play thicker strings. Usually, you would get a standard non-coated strings when you buy a guitar from a shop. However, as I mentioned earlier, the sweat and gunk from our fingers could get trapped in between the string windings, which would make the strings dead. So if you have sweaty fingers, then maybe it's not a bad idea to consider getting a coated string. So what's the difference? With coated strings, the entire string is coated, protecting not only the outer string surface but also the gaps between the windings. As a result, your guitar string tone lasts longer than uncoated strings. Now, some of the common brands out there would be Dunlop, D'Addario, Martin, or Gibson for non-coated strings, and then of course there's Elixir and Cleartone for coated strings. In terms of price variations, they start from about $15 for non-coated all the way to $40 for coated strings. Next, we're going to talk about electric strings. Firstly, is there a difference between electric and acoustic strings? Both acoustic guitar strings and electric guitar strings have different producing sounds, playability, and tone. In general, acoustic guitar strings are thicker and produce a warmer and fuller sound, while electric guitar strings are thinner and produce less volume and a brighter and lighter sound. Electric guitar strings are made using different types of metal alloys, which have a significant difference on the string sound. Some of the most common types of strings are nickel. Nickel will give you a balanced brightness and warmth. Now, if you buy a new guitar from a shop, chances are they came with a set of nickel wound strings on it. Most people also like to play nickel wound strings on their guitars. It is probably the most common type of strings currently used. And then we have cobalt strings. Now, cobalt gives you a wide dynamic range with increased low end and shimmering highs. This here is probably my favorite type of strings that I use on my electrics, because I really love the fact that it gives me more bottom end to my sound, and at the same time it gives me a nice chimey ring on top. Next, you could also get a pure nickel strings. It'll give you a vintage sound with a warm tone. So if you play jazz music, you might really enjoy this type of strings. It sounds a bit rounder and it gives you that cozy feeling, absolutely perfect for chillin' music like in jazz bars. And last but not least is stainless steel strings. Now this one is bright, crisp with edgy tone, but the best thing about this one is that it is corrosion resistant, meaning it doesn't get rusty easily. Now, saying that, I've had some students who have amazingly sweaty and acidic hands who still manage to get this type of string rusty. But generally speaking, stainless steel strings are pretty long lasting and they could handle a fair bit of sweat. So if you like your sound to be bright and lively, then check this one out. Now, for electric guitars, you have more options than what you could find in the acoustic guitar string range. Most guitar that you purchase out of a shop would come in 9 to 42. Now remember, this means the thinnest string is 0.009, which is thinner than the standard acoustic gauge. You'll also commonly find 9 to 46, 10 to 46, 10 to 52 or 11 to 49 gauges in most of your local music shop. Again, let me remind you that the thicker the strings are, the better the tone you get. I'd recommend you to work your strength up to be able to play at least a 10 to 46 gauge, so not too thin and not too thick. I personally fluctuate between 10 to 46 and 11 to 49, depending on the type of music that I'm playing. Now, similar to acoustic strings, electric guitar strings also come in uncoated and coated forms. Some of the common brands are Ernie Ball, D'Addario, Gibson, Kurt Mangan, Elixir, and Cleartone. And they do vary price-wise between $10 all the way to $30. The last category we're going to talk about is classical guitar strings. This is probably the simplest one out of all the three that we're discussing in this video. Generally, classical guitar strings have 3 wound strings, which are the 4th, 5th and 6th string, and the rest are nylon strings. Sometimes you would come across a set that has a wound G string. So in this case, there are 4 wound strings and 2 nylon strings. But the most common ones are the 3 wound and 3 nylon. Now, while acoustic and electric strings have different gauges, classical guitar strings have different tensions. We have low tension, medium tension, high tension, and super high tension. String tension is defined as the amount of force required to bring a string up to its required pitch. The most commonly used tensions are the hard tension and the medium tension or normal tension. High tension strings are generally made from heavier gauge material. This makes the strings feel tighter and it requires more strength to play and control the instrument. The immediate benefit of higher tension strings is greater loudness. A string with greater mass produces more energy, of course, to move the guitar's soundboard. Again, this is the similar concept with thicker gauge baritone that we've talked about previously. However, one downside of using high tension strings is you'll get less brightness in your tone. Now, although hard tension strings are a little louder than regular tension strings are more responsive to technique, like vibrato and volume changes depending on how hard you pluck your strings. There are also seem to be a larger range of tones between dolce all the way to ponticello with regular tension as compared to hard tension. So overall, regular tension offers better dynamic expressions in your playing. However, it doesn't mean that you can't express yourself if you're using hard tension strings. You just have to have a better control over your fingers and technique in order to get the desired dynamics and effects. Now, some of the popular brands are D'Addario, Hanabach, Labelle, and Savarez. Now, I know in Savarez range, the equivalent version of coated strings is what they call long play strings. I've used this type for quite a while now, and they seem to last a bit longer than other normal strings. In terms of price variations, they do vary from $15 a set all the way up to $40 in the long play range. Well, that's the end of part 1. Let me know down in the comments what are your favorite strings, or if you have any questions for us. In the next part, I'm going to show you how to change your strings properly. So stay tuned for that, and I'll see you in the next video. Ciao!